darling viewers, it's Jen here at Chuck Her Joy. This time I'm reviewing Song for a Whale by Lynne Kelly. This is a J-fiction or mid-grade novel. It centers around a 12-year-old girl named Iris who really loves fixing radios and is really into technology and kind of into science, but she is also deaf, and she is the only person in her school who is hearing impaired. And so she feels very isolated and very separate from the other kids her own age. Iris ends up hearing about this whale called Blue 52 in one of her science classes, and it is a whale who sings his song at a different frequency from the other whales around him, and he's always by himself, and there's some guesses that he might not actually be able to communicate and be heard by the other whales, and that's why he's swimming by himself. And so Iris immediately feels this connection to this whale who is also isolated and by himself. And she starts coming up with this plan to use her radios and her knowledge about sound and science to create a song for this whale so it will know that it is not alone in the universe and that somebody has, heard him and recognizes him and knows that he's out there. And it is such a fun book. It is filled with so much optimism, but it's also a really cool book about science and how things work and problem solving, and also dealing with deaf culture and not being able to hear in a hearing world and just being different. And it's so well done. I really love this book. So Iris is born into a family where both of her grandparents are also deaf, and her mother has grown up learning sign language, but also her mother, father, and brother can all hear. And while her mother and brother are perfectly capable and comfortable with signing, her dad is not. And so they have kind of a distant relationship where he isn't always sure how to communicate with her. His signs are a bit slower, so there's some friction within the family. And Iris also definitely feels a strong connection to her grandparents. The book starts off after her grandfather has died, and so it's just the grandmother and her, but they're also both dealing with the grief of this. I think it was about a year ago in the book. So there's some distance from that death. They're also still learning a new normal and grieving, and they also still remember him, and he was such a big part of their lives and kind of the thing that was holding the two of them together, because he and Iris used to have all these conversations and they'd play these games, and the grandmother, while being supportive and loving them both, didn't really connect with them in the same way. She and Iris didn't quite have that same easygoing relationship where they could just sit and create sign language rhymes and stuff. The grandmother is also being very isolated in her grief. And since the grandfather has died, the grandmother has moved into a nursing home, so she's adjusting to a new normal that way and having to make new friends. So isolation and trying to find connections, especially when you are vastly different from everybody around you and there are barriers to making those connections, is a pretty huge theme in this book. Iris also has a best friend named Wendell who is also deaf and uses sign language, but he goes to a school where everybody else also is deaf and uses sign language. And this is something that Iris wants to do. They're about to switch schools and go to middle school anyway, so she wants to go to Wendell School, and she's trying to convince her parents to let her do this in the next year. But her mom also wants her to learn how to adapt to a hearing world. And so her mom is really pushing her to, go to mainstream school with people who can hear, except Iris just feels so isolated. The only person she can really talk to is her sign language interpreter. There was one kid in class who was trying to learn sign language, but she's not doing it with any particular regard to Iris, I would say. No real sensitivity. She's signing really fast. She's not really developing her signs. A lot of what she is signing at Iris is just gibberish. Or she'll sign something and because her hand signs aren't right, they end up saying something completely different, and Iris is having to guess what she meant to say in the first place, and it's not really helping her. And also, this girl has a habit of, when Iris is not getting what she's saying, getting closer and physically being in her face and waving right in front of her. And so she and Iris get into fights. One in particular ends up with Iris getting grounded when her parents find out about it, because she physically fought her back and pushed her away. But she's right in front of your face. This girl was so making me angry. But nobody else is really trying. They they have conversations through the sign language interpreter where, like, somebody who's hearing will, like, tell her something and, you know, he has to interpret it and interpret her response, sometimes writing notes, but, like, she isn't particularly close to any of her classmates because of the workarounds they have to do to have a conversation. It's not a class that is particularly trying to, like, meet her where she is. So Blue 55 is named after the frequency in which his song is, which is 55 hertz. A normal whale sings at around 10 to 20 hertz, and this is so much higher that the scientists who are studying him are thinking that maybe the other whales can't hear him, or that his song is so different that it's like speaking another language to the whales, that even if they can hear him, they can't, like, understand him. He seems to be a hybrid of two different whale species, so he has, like, a different tail fin, it has, like, a different spout, like, the pattern that comes out of his spout is different. Blue 55 basically is off by himself, and sometimes he'll, like, swim along another whale, what are they called, group, for a while, but ultimately he always ends up back on his own. Sometimes he'll hang out with, like, dolphins, but, like, also ultimately ends up by himself. And so he has these weird migration patterns in the water where he's, like, traveling to find food, and most of it's by himself. And so scientists are really interested in learning more about Blue, and they are trying to tag him so they can better track his migration patterns and where he travels. Iris hears about this, and she wonders if they could create their own whale song to play back to him. And so she starts doing research into what 55 hertz is, what instruments can hit that note, researching what whale songs sound like. It was really cool to get into this and see, like, there is sheet music for what a whale song looks like, and how we can, like, map it the way we would, like, write out notes for a song. And so she tries matching that. She ends up talking to, like, the music, the band director at the school, and getting the band to help her. She's using technology to manipulate this and get it to 55 hertz and something that kind of looks like another whale, but she didn't want to just play Blue's song back at him or just manipulate another whale to be, like, at a higher frequency, so she creates her own song. And then she sends this email to these scientists at a research laboratory in Alaska, and they're like, that's cool, we'll try that. Because she already made the song. They're like, that's really cool, we can get a waterproof speaker down there, we'll see if he has any reaction to it. And Iris really wants to be there when they do this, so she plans this trip to Alaska, which was such a fun journey. She ends up going on this trip with her grandmother on a cruise, and the two of them, who are both deaf, going on this journey by themselves. But also I loved getting to see Alaska. Like, there's so many really, really cool parts of this book, and getting to, like, see more of the world, that I super enjoyed all of it. Like, I really, really love science. I love learning about the marine biology, getting to learn more about whales and whale songs and their migration patterns and how they hunt, how scientists are tracking them. I really love the science part of that. I love the science of, like, sound. Iris is deaf, so she can't hear, but she can still feel sound vibrations, and there's a lot of talk of her, like, putting her hand on a speaker or feeling vibrations through the floor, and so she can still hear music. That's how she fixes radios and knows whether or not they're working, is by turning, like, the volume up and feeling for the vibration on the speaker itself. And when she can feel that vibration, she knows she's fixed it, even if she can't hear the results herself. And there's a lot of talk of just how sound waves move, especially in water, how being in water changes that, like, so much science, but it's also so well explained. Because it's still a J-fiction novel, so you've got to explain it on a children's level. And I love how much effort Lynne Kelly did in explaining how the science itself worked. It's a very science fact-based book. There's also a lot about Iris's world and about being deaf and how she's trying to communicate with others, but she also has these strong enough relationships in her life that she doesn't feel like she's missing anything by not being able to hear. Sometimes she might, like, wish she could hear a song or hear what the whales actually sound like, but she never wishes that she could be a hearing person in general. She likes being deaf. She likes the games that she has with her grandparents. She likes hanging out with Wendell. She just wants to be around people who also understand that, and that there's nothing wrong with being deaf. That's a fact of life, and that doesn't mean they can't do anything. Like, she is fixing radios. something that you wouldn't think somebody who can't hear would have an interest in, but like that is where her interest is. And Wendell is really into space and like mapping the constellation. So I love getting to see that world, but also how they have very strong interests. Lynne Kelly is a sign language interpreter, so she can hear, but she's also dealt with a lot of people in real life who are deaf. And so Iris is based off a few people and a few kids that she knows from her own life, and like I think it was 15 or 20 years doing sign language interpreting in schools. So she's based Iris and her experiences after real people. And she also does a good job of describing hand shapes. So one of the games that Iris plays is this rhyming game where they always have to end their stories on the same hand shape. So if they are always using claws, all their signs at the end of their phrases have to also end in a claw. And so she learns how to rhyme in that way, that like you end on the same shape rather than ending on the same sound. And one of her like assignments in school is to write a poem, and she gets it handed back because it doesn't rhyme. And she's like, it rhymes on sign language, but like she can't hear what they actually sound like, so it takes more effort for her to like rhyme in English. So most of this book is told from Iris's perspective. It's in first person, but some of the chapters have Blue 55's perspective, and I'm trying to find one. They're generally really short chapters. There we go. This one's only 2 pages long. But this is, like, if there's a whale on it, that's told from Blue 55's perspective, and we get to see his journey, like, through the ocean and trying to, like, find connections, and him hanging out with other whales and other marine animals. So I love that. I love getting to see the whale's perspective also. I also like the background, like the chapter. I also like the chapter pictures. So they all have this, like, reflection of, like, trees in the water, but they also make a sound frequency, which was really cool. Like, little touches in this book. So, like, the normal chapters are the same picture, but without the whale. So that's what Iris's chapters look like. I also really love this cover with the whale and Iris and like the bubbles, but also like the sound frequencies on it and like the colors, indicative of like the Aurora Borealis because they're going into Alaska. So this is a really, really cool, really interesting book. There's so much happening in here that I could definitely see this like appealing to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. Whether you're into marine biology or sound or just science in general or like Alaska, because they go on this cruise getting to see the glaciers. This book also has 2 like explanatory sections at the back. One is about deaf and sign language, and the other one is about the whale, if I can find that. Yeah, whale communication and the Hertz 52 whales, if you want to find out more about the whale that so there's a real whale that Blue 55 is based off of, who travels on his own and sings at this different frequency. And scientists aren't sure why, so creating a different whale and calling it Blue 55 allowed her the freedom to fictionalize and create this own whale, her new whale's backstory enough that she can play with it and have it interact, and have a chance for Iris to interact with it and kind of change the story without like rewriting a real whale's history. Wow. There's also the sign language interpretations for what the title of the book is, which is kind of cool. Definitely go check out Song for a Whale. It is so awesome. It's so pretty, too. Just, in case you were. That's obviously a reason to buy a book. Okay. So, yeah. Lots of fun. Lots of really interesting, really fascinating things happening in this book. So, peace out. I love you guys, and keep reading. Bye.